welcome to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I mean, hey, listen. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that when the Flyers were on 5-game point streak, I'm doing all right. So before we dive into all that, we do have a lot to talk about. We got the trade deadline coming up. We got a 5-game point streak, all of that stuff. As we're diving into it, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin's at Kevin_Durso, everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. So, diving right into it. Like I said, right off the top, 5-game point streak. It's a good 5-game point streak, right? The Flyers aren't sitting here at 2-0-3. This is a 4-0-1. This is a really sturdy. You've gotten 9 out of 10 points in your last 5 games, and we'll talk about the playoff implications of that a little bit deeper in the show. But just right off the top here, Kevin, what are you seeing out of this team right now?
That they're playing a lot better. That they have, well, one player in particular looks certainly revitalized, doesn't he?
Would that be a certain Russian kid?
Yeah, it would. That's a start.
Which is no longer sole identifier, but the good Russian kid, the top Russian kid.
Yes. Well, his line mates, the other line that's been consistent for about 2.5 months at this point has remained as so. And
heck, even the Russian kid that they brought in to work with him looks pretty good.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Good energy. He brings a good energy. He's noticeable. He hasn't put up a lot of points or anything like that, but Kuzmenko's noticeable. I'll give you that for sure. Even they're even getting wins with the Russian goalies who haven't played in forever.
Yeah, and I was about to mention the fact that as we record here on Monday evening, the latest game in this 5-game point streak was, quite frankly, a hell of a game against the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, it was.
You go into Winnipeg on a Saturday night. They are one of, if not the best team in the league, right? The standings certainly indicate that at this point in the season.
I think by this point they've actually put a little margin on it, so I think they're 4 points.
Oh, they've cleared Washington. Okay.
Yeah, they're 4 points up on Washington, so it was it. I
was the best team in the league.
They are the best team in the league with the best goalie in the league, no question. And a bunch of guys who can score. Right, and a bunch of guys who can score. I mean, they're the reason. The 3 guys that you could refer to right off the top of that lineup are all the guys who contributed to their 1 goal. Like, it was shaping up that way, wasn't it? Like,
and Connor Hellebuck played well. And meanwhile, the Flyers started Ivan Fedotov, who hadn't gotten a win since November 29th. I referred to this game on last week's show as a scheduled loss, and I don't know if it is. It's hard to have a scheduled loss that's not part of a back-to-back. But as far as any scheduled losses go, this certainly seemed like one. And then they tried when you factor in that Ivan Fedotov.
I was saying, and then they tried to make it more of a scheduled loss when they told you who the goalie was.
If you told me that a week ago, the name of last week's episode would have been scheduled loss, like straight up. And as it sits here, you have Ivan Fedotov, who. Listen, I'm just going to say it. He outdueled Connor Hellebuck on this,
which is not a sentence you would have expected to say going in.
Never ever. And I'm under no delusions about who Ivan Fedotov is versus who Connor Hellebuck is. Don't get it wrong, but he looked fantastic.
So I got to tell you, Ivan Fedotov's got 5 wins this season. 3 of them have been against Connor Hellebuck, Andrei Vasilevsky, and Igor Shesterkin. Yep. The guy rises to the occasion. You can't deny that, right?
And he's not the only one on the team. We've talked about Matvei Michkov elevating his game when he plays against elite talent. And if Ivan Fedotov can find a little bit of that too, I'll take it.
Look, I don't know if Ivan Fedotov senses that this is as critical as it could be for him individually. I don't know if that's where his mind is at.
Oh, what's going on with Alexei Kolosov these days?
Nothing.
Which is a problem.
Oh, no kidding. But that's conversation for another day, though, with that, because the thing is the fact of the matter is that Ivan Fedotov has another year on his contract, but may not, but kind of for a while was sitting there not as the solution, right? Like, this may not be working out the way we thought. What do you do about that now? He's got a shot to play himself into a role. Like, he can play himself into a role for another year. You're not going to solve your goaltending overnight.
Well, right,
The two 19-year-olds, or they're probably pushing 20 by this point, but like they're not coming here
not coming
next year either.
Nope.
Well, no. If nothing else, if Bjarnason turns 20, he can turn pro.
Okay, so he can go to Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, so he can go to Lehigh Valley and take the path that everybody wanted Kolosov to take, and
Which,
start
quite frankly, if Kolosov refuses to take it, that opens up a spot in Lehigh Valley.
No, and Bjarnason can run with that all day.
Mm-hmm.
Zavragan's going to stay over in the KHL for a while, but that's
which is
fine. Yep.
Let
him
stew simmer for years and
Yep.
years.
Yep. And then I don't know.
Let him come over and win a Vezina right away.
I was going to say, I don't know. What year do we have to get to? 2028, 29? You may have a
what year is that building open? 31?
Well,
they'll be here by then. Before then.
No, I was going to say, they said that's the expectation, or at least that's the latest that they would open. It could open earlier if they do more.
Nah, I doubt it. I thought you were going to indicate that it was going to be pushed back, and I was going to say,
no. I think that
construction in Philadelphia pushed back. No way. 95 will be done any day now.
Well, this is, you know what? This is a little different, though. They kind of do show favoritism to, we got to get that done for the sports complex.
The $1 billion facility.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, there's a lot of positive pieces to this thing. I mean, how can you deny? I mean, guess what? Who scored the only goal in regulation time against Winnipeg? That's a positive development, is it not?
You know what?
Jamie Drysdale playing a lot better.
Third of the year.
And it's not about the numbers. Like, I've liked his game leading up to that point for no reason other than, like, being able to read the play better, being a little more active. Like, the other stuff will follow if you do all of those things. Like, you don't just worry about scoring goals.
Well, and let's be honest. Let's look at Jamie Drysdale's development path here. He has spent a lot of his off seasons that most of his compatriots have spent conditioning and strengthening and building this long-term cardio. Jamie Drysdale spent a lot of time rehabbing injuries. So he's one of those guys that, again, I expect him to come around. This is not a long-term indictment on him. I fully expect him, as he continues to bank healthy time, I just continue to see him improve. But he's a guy who benefited from having 2 weeks off and has looked really good since coming back from the break.
Sure. And that's all you can hope for, is that guys, you want to see guys continue no matter what happens here, because now we're going to enter the territory, especially for what week it is. You're going to enter the territory of battling the standings versus what the main objective of the rest of the season is. If that becomes part of it too, that's a bonus, but it's not the main objective, right? Like, the main objective is still finding out things. If finding out things amounts to playoff appearance by some miracle, you take it. But
here's the thing. As we said here on Monday evening recording, the Flyers are 4 points out of a playoff spot, having played one more game than Detroit, the team that currently sits there. They're 4 points out of a playoff spot, so they're still kind of within striking distance. They do have to jump 4 teams to get there, so it's certainly not an easy world. But if you look at the schedule, you go to your phone, pull up your NHL app, hit the little schedule button. Flyers have a whole block of orange games coming up. Mm-hmm. You got 7 home games in the next 12 days. Kevin, you know that as well as anybody.
Yeah, because I got a plan.
You don't have anything else going on in your life, right? You can just go to spend 2 weeks at the Farg.
I mean, it's going to buy my time very nicely, right?
Well, and this first week, it's a lot of Western Conference, right? Calgary, Winnipeg, and Seattle come through. Second week, you mix in some Eastern Conference, including some divisional. You got the Devils, you got Carolina, you got Ottawa and Tampa in the middle of the week. Those are big points.
I was going to say,
huge points. Ottawa is one of the teams you have to jump.
Well, so there you go. You got that one, right?
The Devils will probably be one of the teams you need to jump by then, because they're frauds. They're falling out of it.
If Columbus continues to do what they've been doing, and what a great story they are. What a great story they are.
I hope they add huge. I hope they go take a big fat swing. Like, if Carolina ends up moving Rantanen, come on, man. Come on, man. That would be great.
You know what's funny, though? Like, they've already made a big addition without having to do anything, because they came out of the break and Boone Jenner came back. And it's like, that helps, like, that even helps your team, You know
what I mean. I would love to see them take a swing. And Rantanen's perfect. even if he wants to go to free agency, that's okay. Just get him as a pure rental.
Well, think about something for a minute. Based on what you're saying, I don't think Rantanen's going to Columbus, by the way, but just I will humor you. What
Especially
was
if Carolina, yeah, never mind.
What was Columbus's best playoff experience ever? Like, what was their best playoff year? Was the year
Was
that
that 2020? Was that
well,
the bubble?
no, because they got kicked after
No,
they made it through
you're
that
right.
that qualifier. It was the year that they upset Tampa.
Right. The sweep.
But what was the key behind that? They knew that was as good of a shot as they had to do anything with it because Bobrovsky was on his way out the door, Panarin was on his way out the door, Duchesne was on his way out the door, but it didn't matter. They went out and they swept the team that had just set an NHL record at the time for wins and points, and
crazy.
And
that Columbus team, what they did doesn't get enough love looking back because Tampa went on to win 2 cups and go to the final in 3 straight years. Everyone forgets that villain origin story started with Sergei Bobrovsky. Game 1, they're up 3-0. He makes a save.
Remember that again. Remember that again when those two, I mean Tampa and Bobrovsky, meet in the playoffs again this year. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. It's shaping up that way, one way or the other. Might be first round, might be first round, might be second, but it's shaping up to happen. But
we can't get into the.
No. I know.
You
went. I'm just saying you went to Columbus and whatever.
No,
I'm just saying. There's so much to like about the team. Even if the game-winning goal of the Stadium Series shouldn't have counted.
Listen,
grand scheme of things. I mean, look, you can't fault a team for if a penalty was supposed to be called. That's the human element, right?
Absolutely, that's the game we all know.
But they end up with another game. I don't even worry about the game part of it. What did I put in the group text after that game was over? As soon as the Gaudreaus led the team into the building, did you think there was any doubt they were losing?
Nope. I did want to send a little shout out to the Detroit Red Wings, by the way, who all showed up in Johnny Gaudreau jerseys to the stadium.
Right, they wore like
Team USA
ones,
Boston
BC,
College, and I assume a Gloucester Catholic snuck in there somewhere.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then Columbus.
It was nice to see out of Detroit.
Well, and then Columbus's was they went with like the sweatshirt look that he always would wear going in. Right. Right. So both of them did something. Well, now I don't know if this is as I'm sure it was publicized to a degree. I didn't watch the whole broadcast like glued to it to hear if they said exactly that, but Dylan Larkin was definitely close with the Gaudreaus in and things like that.
Both big members of Team USA hockey came up around the same time.
I think they used to hang out in the off season.
I'm not surprised.
Right. Yeah. So there you go.
No, but regardless, I do, obviously, as a Flyers fan, I do want them to make the playoffs. I don't want them to make the playoffs at the expense of the Columbus Blue Jackets, because that story is just awesome.
And they just got pieces that I think would just do well in the playoffs. Like, come on, Zach Werenski in the playoffs.
Man, with the year he's been having, I'm a little nervous because in the playoffs you can game plan a little more for him, and he'll probably get locked down pretty good. But still, if he gets to run wild in games 1 and 2, I would love.
Yeah, I hear you. But anyway,
Anyway, so as we sit here, like I mentioned, the Flyers are 4 points out. Where there's 2 games before the trade deadline, right? Trade deadline's Friday.
Yes. So Tuesday and Thursday, and then trade deadline. Please don't tempt fate with the fact that Thursday could be a late night.
It sure could. Okay. And the big names that are out there. Are we going to get to the trade deadline, or is there anything else you wanted to do on this little 5-game point streak?
We'll get back to the 5-game point streak because we're going to talk about probably more individuals than we will, anything else. But let's hit the deadline stuff because
I do think the trade deadline is going to be the meat of the show.
Well, and it's a handful of players we're not going to spend a ton of time on because it's interesting. Like the players we're going to talk about for the deadline stuff are not really as big of a part of the story of the point streak as everybody else is. You know what I mean? Like they're really footnotes on the successes of the team, like in terms of they're just playing to their roles. They're not point produced guys. They're not, anything of that sort. They just have been solid, all things considered.
So as is the case this year, as it has been for the last several years now, there's a couple names kind of at the center of this, and anybody with an expiring contract is obviously, a little more up for grabs than others, but there really aren't that many of them. The two big names as it sits, and ironically, as I say that, the two biggest names are both guys who have a little bit of term left. But as has been the case the last several years, Scott Laughton's name is kind of at the top of the trade board, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. And
Sure.
then the other major name out there as far as league interest is Rasmus Ristolainen.
Well, league interest in very general terms, because
Right.
it's faded a lot recently. Like, I think that he was a name that everybody would have put a high percentage that he's moving prior to Four Nations. And then he got hurt, couldn't play in Four Nations, was fine to come back effective immediately from the break, so it wasn't that serious of an injury that it kept him out of NHL games down the line. And then it seemed like right after that, the interest was way down. And some of that has to do with price tag. Some of that has to do with, other options. I mean, teams are going to look for the expiring contract first. They're not pure rentals. That's the hard part. You don't have any pure rentals on the team unless you move Eric Johnson.
Which no one's giving you much for Eric Johnson at this
Or
point.
if you flip Andrei Kuzmenko and at that point play around with the idea of retaining half, do whatever you want to with it. I think they still want to see him.
I assume you retain half if you're flipping Kuzmenko.
Well, right, I think they just want to see him. So I think they want to keep him because, like, to be honest with you, he could have come in and played 5 minutes a night, and if it means Michkov played the way that he did because he has another guy around, you would have said keep him.
Absolutely. And there is definitely value in that, and I don't necessarily know if there's long-term value in Kuzmenko at the money he's at. Obviously,
to me, it would need to come way down.
No, that's what I'm saying. And he signed that. We talked about this a little bit on our last show. He signed that coming off a big season, his first year over here, big expectations, et cetera, and has kind of fallen from that. And obviously, if there is any sort of extension with the Flyers, you would think that it would come at a bit of a lower number.
To me, it would have to. You've got to be very mindful of the money situation, especially if you're going to do anything else, like you've got to, even at least at the deadline, you've got to tread lightly on retaining on anybody.
I agree.
Short of Kuzmenko at, okay, you want to take $2.75 million for the rest of the year, go right ahead. Who cares? It's coming off the books as soon as the year's over.
Is this the year that the rest of the money comes off the books as far as like the Tony DeAngelo buyout and
the DeAngelo
Ryan
buyout?
Ellis?
No, so the DeAngelo. Okay, so there's a couple different angles here, and I'm
okay.
I knew that I just know going into it, and I did OMB Puckcast before this, so I just knew that. But I knew that Puckpedia was going to come in handy tonight because you just know that you're right. It's the deadline show.
This week and next week are big Puckpedia shows for sure.
Sure. Yeah. So what comes off the books this year? The Tony DeAngelo buyout, the Cal Peterson contract.
Okay.
And that's really no. Kevin Hayes is after next year.
Okay.
So Kevin Hayes is after next year, and Atkinson are next year, and then by that
that's
point,
all the money they have off on the cap at this point, right?
That's retention and buyout.
All the dead money. Okay.
Well, that's retention and buyout. By the time the following season ends, so this is post 2026 or post 25-26, I guess is how you want to look at it, right? The 2026 offseason. You should, unless you do more, have no more retention, no more buyouts, unless you do something else.
Right.
And you are 1 year away from Ryan Ellis contract being off the books.
Which, of course, as we all know, you can put into LTIR. They don't want to, but they right. Anyway.
I think by that point, they might even be tempted to buy it out with 1 year to go.
I just don't think there's any real need to. Like, if you end up pushing the cap and you put him in LTIR, no big deal.
Well, just hear me out on this, okay? Because I did at one point in time.
Can afford it.
I know. I looked up the way that would be if they bought him out in the last year, so prior to 26-27, right? You're still saving $3 million that 1 year, and then the cap penalty the following year is $1.5 million.
In a year where,
in a year by that point where the cap is up
discussed,
$20-some odd million from what it was now.
the
Like,
cap might
eat the
be
1.5 million to
120.
get out from under 3 million at the time. If you want to go
No,
something like,
I
I don't
I
know who.
agree. That's I didn't
Well,
realize the calculations
no.
look like that. That probably
Well,
makes
hang on a
sense.
minute. I don't know who you might want to. Never mind. Who might you want to go for that you need $3 million extra dollars?
Is that the summer Kaprizov is available by any
Yeah, it's
chance?
one of them, sure, but who
Oh, okay.
else?
I mean, okay, we all know Connor McDavid's not going to hit the market. Let's be so for real.
Stranger things. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but not really. But not really. Let's be honest.
Either way, regardless, whoever, take your pick. Whoever the big fish on the market is, you're going after him. More than likely. By that point,
I agree. Absolutely.
So if the cap is up as high as they think it's going to be, and you are out from underneath of $3 million more just by saying buyout because there's nothing left, no buyouts on the books, no salary retention, I would do it in a second to get out from underneath of that one and just worry about it for 2 more years and then be done with it.
Listen, I know that we mentioned Danny Briere's name a lot on this show as, the guy with the keys.
Right.
Who's his boss?
We're talking about Keith Jones.
And who was running the show when Keith Jones was playing in Philadelphia?
Like what? Like on an
I'm
ownership
talking,
level or the
I'm
president?
talking running the show. I'm talking about Ed Snyder.
Sure. Yeah, and what did they do? They always went out and went for the big guys, of course.
So what I'm saying is, and again, no inside knowledge, this isn't a report. What I'm saying is, with the cap going up the way it's going, and the cap space that the Flyers have going the way it's going, I expect the Flyers to be major players for the next 3 off seasons, basically.
Okay, guess what? So you've said something wrong in this already because Jonesy's running partially. Jonesy is Danny Briere's boss. That's true.
Direct supervisor.
Yeah, just hold on. Who's the guy with the checkbook though?
Well, a lifelong fan who grew up watching the Snyder era.
Who's come as close as anybody I've ever seen to being 2.0.
Correct.
So what do you think's going to happen? You're going after guys, and they seem.
Guys.
Well, think about something. I talked about this on 97.3 this week at some point. I forget which spot it was that I was doing that I brought this up, but it was like you got a up close look during the course of the week. You're playing Pittsburgh twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now tell me that franchise knows what direction they're going.
I think Kyle Dubas knows what direction that franchise is going.
Can they win a game with the core they have? Of course they can. Erik Karlsson is still Erik Karlsson to a degree, and Malkin's still Malkin to a degree, and Crosby's still Crosby. But
to a degree.
No, I kind of take that one off with Crosby.
A pretty high degree.
Although Crosby didn't really do much in the 2 games either. He was even in the second one. Malkin took over the second game more than anybody. But anyway,
are they done for the season?
What's that?
Flyers Penguins? Are they done for the
season?
Yes. Okay, then we can talk about it. Okay, great. Sid wasn't great. You're right. Correct.
But my point is, they're at that crossroads that you hit where it's like, what do you do with the guys who, they're treasured, no question. You're gonna. I think they brought it up on because what was it? The second game of the home and home was on ESPN Plus. Yes. So because it was a national game and it's in Pittsburgh, they put a shot of the banners up there, and it was here's Lemieux and Jágr, and there will be more to come because they're playing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that's true. So it's hard. Believe me. How long in Philadelphia after any team certainly in our lifetime won something finally? That would be the Phillies. How long did it take before you moved on from the guys that were part of that and were like, I guess we have to. You know what I mean?
Long time.
But it took a long time to break it up first because it's like you don't wanna. Nobody wants to, but you hit that crossroads at some point. Okay, that's Pittsburgh. What are the Rangers doing right now?
They're coming.
But where are they at what is their activity like? They just traded. They just traded Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey, which isn't a big deal, but then they're holding out Riley Smith. And that might only be scratching the surface as you get further into the week. Like, are they breaking something up?
It looks like they kind of might be, but they might also be. They're also one of those franchises that are less likely to blow it up as they are to be willing to move some major pieces in order to get the
So they'll
pieces they
retool.
need. Yeah. Like the Vegas retool where you still get good. They'll somehow get Jack Eichel out of this. You know what I mean?
Maybe, but like
Not
at the same
literally, but you know what I
no, but
mean.
maybe, but at the same time, are the other guys going to be as good as they ever were? Like, how many years has it been with Zibanejad and Kreider? And, at this point, Fox has been around forever, it feels like. Panarin's been around for
And
a long time. Like, you got to start thinking about those things when it hasn't gone the direction you want it to, despite
to be
having a
fair,
good core.
I think Fox is like 25 or 26. You
But he's
probably hold on to him.
Oh, I'm not saying you're not holding on to him, but I'm saying how long have they been around that you start to consider that
Well,
it
but
hasn't resulted the way you want it to.
I was going to say, if you're blowing stuff up, I think Kreider and Zibanejad are towards the top of that list. And I think
Sure.
Panarin's not too far behind it if
Panarin's
things
the
get
one I
real
think.
bad.
Panarin's the one I think you hold out for because he's probably the best of the three.
Yeah, but he's probably a
But he's also
little too old to be there if you have any sort of extended retool. If it takes you 2 years to get back,
see. I don't think that.
is he the
I
same
don't think
player in
they. I don't
2027?
think they can even approach this thinking it's going to be an extended retool. They have to assume it's a. They need this year, and they won't finish in the same spot, relatively speaking. But they need this year to be 06-07 Flyers that you turn over on a dime in the offseason.
Yeah, but you just did this 3 or 4 years ago as the Rangers.
I know.
You drafted Lafreniere, you drafted Kakko back to back. Kakko is gone. Lafreniere's in the bottom 6. Like,
Which will
I
never
don't
make
know.
sense to me, but
I
whatever.
don't know. Well,
Okay. All right. So, but
yeah.
so what is that? So basically, what's the point I'm making? A lot of question marks, right?
Well, and going back to the assets that could potentially move, you have Rasmus Ristolainen, who apparently the talk has cooled a little bit throughout the league,
Right.
and the other name is Scott Laughton, who, by all accounts, we've heard a couple of different insiders say that he has made it clear that he wishes to stay. He does not want to be traded. He wants to be a part of this team, and the Flyers are still fielding calls because that's what a good business does, but they're not going to move him unless they kind of get the sun and the moon for him.
Right. So you got to look at the three different avenues here. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody wants to be traded, especially when you've been here as long as Scott Laughton has. You don't want to be traded. Guess what? Claude Giroux didn't want to be traded either until it became evident that it was time, and then he held the cards to where he was going to go next after the fact.
And for the record, I don't think fans want to trade the person Scott Laughton either. Now, the asset maybe, but the person, I think everyone loves Scott Laughton here in Philadelphia.
Right. Because I think the point of the asset thing is that you could probably find hell, you've already got another Scott Laughton on your roster.
Right.
His name's Noah Cates.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Frankly, I think Cates' ceiling is higher than Laughton's.
Oh, he's got more skill. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He's got more skill, so of course it's higher. But my point is,
I think Noah Cates' ceiling is Sean Couturier. Frankly. Anyway,
it'll be a lovely thing if it was.
Yeah.
I'm not going. I'm not shooting that high because I think they're going to put people in front of him. But you want an immediate.
There was always somebody in front of Couturier for a very long time.
That's true. Now anyway. Yeah, so so nobody wants to be traded. They're going to ask for what they're asking for because
it's of a first round pick plus.
So I don't see it that way. I see it first rounder or first round equivalent is what I keep coming back to. They want like in other words, if you're Toronto, who always is linked to Laughton, right? So this is not a far-fetched thing to say.
Some Cowan?
I don't know because here's the thing, and I just had
there's also Fraser Minton.
Well, correct, but also so Cowan's played kind of a hybrid forward role. He's not necessarily a straight center. You know what else? He isn't? He's not above 6 foot, and Fraser Minton's 6'2", 194. You want a forward with size who plays up the middle? Maybe you target Fraser Minton. Maybe. Who let's face it. If Cowan's the better prospect for all intents and purposes here, right? That he's the guy who's going to get more attention. He puts up the bigger numbers in juniors, all that, right? He's going to have a better shot of making the Leafs roster at some point before Minton does, probably. Minton's going to end up somewhere in the middle of that. Well, as long as the core 4 is here, good luck finding a spot.
Yeah, that core four is going to change, though. Tavares is about to transition into elder statesman, and he's not really going to be a part of that core four anymore. Let's be honest.
As
He's
much
probably
as
going to go to the wing, too.
as much as that might be true, that's not the case right now. And you're making a move for right now. You're saying, hey,
That's
what
true.
if we bring Scott Laughton in?
I agree. No, I listen, I agree. And I think if you're
For the team that's
Toronto,
won won one playoff series in the last 20 years?
but here's the thing, though. Are you acquiring Scott Laughton to play center for you? Because that's not something he's done the last couple of years,
No, maybe
honestly.
not. But regardless,
See, but
it's
I think he's seen around the league as a center, and maybe in Toronto's system he can play a third line center, and the
oh,
system
I
kind of
believe that.
supports it. Right, the system supports it. But Scott Laughton does not have reps at center over the last 2-3 seasons, really, not a ton of them at least.
No, and it just depends. Like, listen, I think Scott Laughton's offensive game could be a lot better with whatever he plays within Toronto.
I mean, sure.
Like, like I don't because there's a part of me that sits there and goes, I think Laughton's a more effective player when he plays wing in Philadelphia. That doesn't mean that he can't have the same kind of offensive presence and production playing center for a team like Toronto.
One, especially if you're on the third line behind, a Matthews and a Tavares, for example.
Right, and then what,
Right.
I'll humor this. Who's playing on their third line wing right now? I'll pull up.
I assume you're pulling it up here, but
You want to throw in between Bobby McMahon and Nick Robertson?
probably sounds pretty great, honestly. Sounds pretty great.
Either that, or he's the guy who jumps in for Connor Dewar, let's say, and plays on the fourth line wing with Kampf and Yarncroke. Now that's an energy line for you, right?
And in the playoffs, that
That
line's a
matters.
problem. Yep.
And all I'm saying is that if you're replacing somebody in that bottom six at some point over the next year or so, if it's Cowan because he's the high prospect, then Minton possibly gets buried and he's stuck in the minors. He's like,
Maybe, yeah.
They don't. It's not that they don't need, but like all I keep thinking about with that situation is what if he becomes what Nick Robertson's had to go through, which is up and down, never quite sticking in the lineup because there's there's just not a place. You're not getting into the top six, so you got to be in the bottom six, and now it's a game of musical chairs down there. Minton comes into Philadelphia, he's playing effective immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Turning. As soon as he's pro and all that, I think he might already be pro actually.
I believe
he's in the AHL right now.
Yeah, I believe he's in the AHL.
So he would be immediate, and because Cowan's not. Cowan's got to be
right. He's still in
pulled
juniors.
from right, but he'll go pro next year.
Absolutely, he's playing with Bunk and Barkey up in London. They're going to go win a Memorial Championship.
But this is like, and I don't know what the significance behind the numbers are. Like if there was an injury or something, but Minton's played 15 games with the Leafs this year, and then 25 with the Marlies. Now, I'm saying I don't know the significance.
I think he was healthy scratched for.
But that's my point. So you're stuck being a healthy scratch with a team. You'd want to go anywhere else if you got to play.
Fair enough. And listen, in that situation, he wouldn't really have much of a choice, right? He's a young player on his ELC. He's going to make the best of whatever opportunity he can get.
Well, and then think about it. Then if Laughton's guy comes in, then Laughton surpasses somebody else because he's going into the lineup effective immediately. He's there for another year because the contract indicates that. So it's not even just a rental. It's not even like you're trying to sit here and say, well, temporarily we'll keep all those guys because whoever we bring in is now if they want to do. Yeah, I think Jake Evans is a pending free agent who's on the market, same kind of style as Laughton to a degree. You want to do that and not give up as much and have a guy who's there for the rest of the year, and then you go from there, be my guest. But if you want Scott Laughton, you're getting him for another year, and the price is higher because of that.
And I think there's going to be, if Scott Laughton is the guy this trade deadline, as far as that kind of player archetype, you get yourself into a spot where there's a lot of guys out here who are kind of like Scott Laughton, and you can go get one of them for a second or a third or whatever the deal is.
Right.
If you want Scott Laughton, the real deal, this guy.
Right.
It's gonna cost you because
right, and that might be
doesn't need to move him.
And that may be a
go.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm saying that may be a for better or worse kind of thing, where the leverage is there, where it's like you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. The player doesn't want to move.
And I think
If
Danny
you get
Briere
what
is
you want, you
perfectly
do.
happy
Right.
with that.
Right. And that's why I'm gonna, as we sit here doing this on the Monday night of the trade deadline week, I'm cautioning everybody now. Don't be shocked if they do nothing, because they don't
And that's
have
not
to
even a
do
bad
anything.
thing.
Right.
And that's not
Well, because
even
they
a
don't.
bad
Well,
thing.
no. And here's the thing: did they really do nothing? They already made their move. Farabee and Frost traded.
That was the big move. Right?
That was one of the big moves. Now, if you do anything else from there, it adds to it. But that's where you started this process. You've already sold a little.
And if you are in the business of online rumors and listening to things like 32 Thoughts and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Elliot Friedman seems to indicate, and this makes a lot of sense because Danny Briere has essentially told us this himself already.
Mm-hmm.
But Elliot Friedman has indicated that the Philadelphia Flyers are making it known throughout, kind of the NHL's inner circles that they're going to be players. They expect to make big moves. They are going to try to be doing things, presumably at this point, mostly in the summer, right? The draft, free agency, things like that.
Pretty much that 1 week of the off season.
But I believe the phrase he used was that they're gearing up to take a big swing. And I
think
don't
they have to.
know. Right. And again, he didn't mention anything specific, of course, but he could be talking about a trade. He could be talking about an offer sheet. He could be talking about an unrestricted free agent. But
All of the above.
regardless, and hello, back to my point earlier about Keith Jones and the owner he came up under in Philadelphia. He knows what it's like to go get the big free agent and make a run.
Well, okay, so so case in point, when we did the show last week, we had a decently long discussion about RFAs and offer sheets.
Yep.
So when you're watching that game against Winnipeg on Saturday, you're paying a little extra close attention to Gabe Vilardi just because, take out the shootout move at the end. But the play he made on the goal was nice, right? Does he look good on a power play? Does he look like he knows what he's doing?
Just keep that in mind. Be a nice little piece.
Just keep that in mind. When one of the names I said is probably coming off the board pretty soon, based on everything we've seen. But they do play Dallas later this month. If everything is still status quo, are you going to watch Wyatt Johnston a little closer?
Yeah, now and what you're alluding to is there's rumors that there's been an 8-year contract offer. Rumors that it hasn't been accepted.
He might get more. He might try for more.
I mean, you can't get more than 8 years.
No. I mean money.
Oh, so the thing is, and I've heard some agents talking about this. I've heard Dangle podcast talking about this a little bit. If you're a young stud like Wyatt Johnston, and the Caps is doing, and the Caps doing what the Caps doing, why on earth would you sign a long-term deal at this point? Why would you sign 8 years when the cap is $92 million, when by the end of it the cap might be 140? And I don't even think that's crazy.
Well, that's what they've been saying from an RFA standpoint. That's what's been said about Noah Cates.
I'm
the
nervous
team
about bridging Noah Cates.
Because here's the thing: that Noah Cates is that the team is somewhere in the range of like $3.5 million or something like that, and the player I think is in right. Well, I've already in my head at least, if I were to jot down a number for Noah Cates right now, based on, and just as if I'm trying to calculate, here's the cap space they have. They've got to sign A, B, and C. Who gets what? I would have put Noah Cates at 4.5 immediately.
Oh yeah. If you can get him less, great, but
I might even run him to 5x5 if you go 5, right? Like 5 years by $5 million.
If he's willing to give you 5 or 6, yep, done.
Right,
done. Especially with the cap where it's going. By the end of that, cap's 125, 130, 140, whatever it is in 4, 5, 6 years. Done. That will look like an absolute steal if he's putting up even 60 points and playing good two-way hockey, even if he's poor man Sean Couturier.
Yeah.
Done.
Oh, I hear you.
I'll take that through his prime for sure.
Well, I would, of course you would do that. And who knows? Right. So who knows? But
Yeah, as far as the money goes, but if you're a free agent, as far as Wyatt Johnston goes, I don't know why he would sign any more than 2 or 3 years.
Valid.
2 or 3 years, whatever, though, even if it's a little bit cheaper than the number you want, blah, 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 whatever it is, you get to come back in 3 years, even if it's 7 for Wyatt Johnston. I think 3 by 7 would be about what a bridge looks like. If you come back in 3 years, cap's 25 million higher than it is now. And if I'm Wyatt Johnston and I'm still doing Wyatt Johnston stuff, I'm looking at
Right.
double digits at that point. I'm looking at the big fat extension. But it's crazy what the league's finances are going to do over the next couple of years. This cap going up, players are going to be making more. Connor McDavid's about to make an absolute pile next summer.
Now, tell me if you believe this or not, because as we're talking about, the more we're talking about this,
Yeah.
Does that maybe put the Flyers in a position to have an advantage? Because as opposed to teams
Absolutely.
that have to sit there and go, I got this guy who's really good. He's gonna want to make a haul. I might like the best I can do is short term him, bridge deal him until we get there or whatever. But then the threat is always there for him to walk anyway. Whereas the Flyers look like they're going to come into one of at least for one of, and I'm not even talking about this year. I'm talking about next offseason. One of the, as one of the teams with maybe more money to spend that can just be basically waiting to poach people.
The deals the Flyers have already signed are going to look spectacular. The Travis Konechny deal is going to age well. The Owen Tippett contract is going to age well.
The
The
Travis
Travis
Sanheim
Sanheim
one looks
contract is
good.
going to age.
Believe it or not, and relevant to the conversation we're on right now, the Rasmus Ristolainen one is not bad.
I absolutely
It
agree.
was the day it was signed. No question
Absolutely.
about it. It was the day it was
Awesome.
signed. But with the steps that they've made and the growth that he's had on top of it, it's a fair value for what he's doing right now.
As well as the cap going up. That does also help.
Well, it was also like, look, what one of the things that was floated out there today was about that Cam York's next contract, like the fair value on it might be $6 million, right? Guess what? That is what a second pairing guy's gonna make, and he's playing top pair minutes right now.
I agree. I think, quite frankly, if you can, similar to Noah Cates, if he'll give you 5 or 6 years at a number like 6, done. Run it, sprint to the bank. Sign the contract.
What people don't do enough of when it comes to contracts is look for the wins, from a money standpoint, while looking at the bigger negatives of like, oh, this contract's terrible, right? And the Flyers don't have a good forward example, but like balance it out, right? Like everybody's gonna get fixated on the Sean Couturier number. Oh, his cap hit is this, but Matvei Michkov's here and playing better than Couturier is, obviously from a production standpoint, and makes less than $1 million because he's on his ELC now. That will change eventually, but who knows who the next guy is, right? Like there could be a next guy who beyond Michkov balances out the Couturier contract by making next to nothing. Maybe it's Jet Lachenko.
Right. Well, and listen, you asked if the Flyers were in a good position moving forward as far as this cap going up and the contract. And like I mentioned, I think the contracts they have signed pretty good, right? You got your Travis Konechny, you got your Sean, or your Travis Sanheim. Those deals are going to age really well. Owen Tippett.
Mm-hmm.
The problem,
yeah,
is that the biggest contract in Philadelphia Flyers history is going to come up in the summer of 2027.
Yes. After the 26-27 season.
And by biggest, I mean most impactful. It may be the biggest financially. I think it will be the biggest as far as impact. And that, of course, I am talking about the expiration of the ELC of Matvei Michkov. He will need a deal. Obviously, they can start talking about it next summer. He'll sign it 2 summers from now, blah, 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 blah.
But you've got time to get there. That's the key.
I agree. But I think I'm hoping if the metagame for player contracts moves to shorter term 2-3-year deal, 1-2-3-year deals, then that first bridge deal for Matvei Michkov might not be too bad, right? You still retain RFA control at the end of it. He makes whatever. The end of that's the big contract. That's the one that's, very likely to be the most lucrative contract in Flyers history. But hopefully, we can get a bridge deal out of the way that doesn't, absolutely break you in half. But
this isn't
obviously that's 2 years from now.
This isn't going to be completely a parallel situation, but you've already brought his name up once on the show, so I'll bring it up again because this is how quickly you can go in terms of it. Listen, you're talking about bridging a deal. Let's go the other direction with it, because Minnesota got Kirill Kaprizov for 2 years under $1 million because that's how ELCs work. And then when it came time for him to sign another contract in 2021, 2022, ahead of that season, boom, $9 million AAV at a time when the cap was not up. Like, it's not a stretch to think that Michkov goes from
long?
What's that?
But for how long?
5 years.
Mm-hmm. Not full term.
No, but okay. The problem with that was nobody was thinking full term in 2021 because of the COVID situation.
Of course, we didn't know where the cap was going.
The 8-year deals have gone up a lot because I think there's more clarity. What I'm saying is just don't be surprised if Michkov goes from under $1 million to double digits.
Oh,
seriously.
I completely agree, and that's what I'm saying. And when I say
his play will determine that,
of course. And when I say a contract that doesn't break you in half, it might still be 10, 12 million. Again, 2 summers from now,
right?
But at that point, I expect Connor McDavid to sign for no less than 17 or 18 a year. I expect his next contract to be absolutely bloody enormous.
Yeah. It's going to be. It should be.
Right. And the Matvei Michkov contract that follows will hopefully, assuming his career does what we hope it does, will rival it, right? Hopefully he's got a ring or 2 by then, and we can, we're having some different conversations. At that point, sign the contract, who cares? But if Connor McDavid signs next summer, right, the contract that takes place a year, or takes effect a year from that, signs next summer an AAV that's going to be 17 or 18 million. I mean, that's a game changer as far as the NHL goes. Like, the NHL enters a new era of player contracts.
Yeah, I hear you.
And the cap exploding is going to help that along. So it's going to be super interesting. And like I said, it all kind of comes back to my point about the Flyers being active over the next 3 off seasons. There's going to be a lot of cap space. A lot of shifting parts.
3 is. You're not
summer, next summer.
You're not wrong about it. I still think the 2 most impactful have to be the next 2.
I agree.
Because, to be honest, honestly, the 3rd one might just be for it's time for Michkov. That's it. Everything else needs a lot of what else needs to happen probably needs to happen by then, just so you have an idea of what you can even spend on Michkov.
I agree. Well, and
you kind of I can't see you.
Summer.
No, and I get that.
Talking to him
but I'm saying you can't go into 3 off seasons from now. I guess it's based on how you're looking at it. Right. You can't go into that not with no clue where the number 1 center is.
I know. I agree.
You need to know. He may not even be here yet. I don't care. If it's a draft pick, if it's a guy you drafted, so be it. But at least you know.
I think.
I don't think it will be a draft pick, by the way.
So here's the thing. We've talked a lot about Noah Cates on this show. And I think Noah Cates has done a great job this season. And again, obviously, this is something that he has to solidify over the next couple of years here.
Yeah.
But I think he is showing 2C potential here.
Possibly. 3C for sure. 2C is possible. They need a guy in front of everybody who's on the roster right now. They absolutely need a guy in front of everybody who puts up a lot of points. Then from there,
do you think Jet Luchenko is that guy?
That's who I think might have a 2C ceiling.
Okay.
I'm already sitting here going.
So but you don't think he's a 1C right now?
Luchenko? No.
Correct. Okay. So right now you're sitting at Noah Cates, who again is looking to be somewhere between that 2C, 3C. Maybe if your team's good enough, you can slide him down to 3C.
That's the goal to me is someone's going to be the number 1 because they need somebody who actually puts up points at a clip that they need it to be. Luchenko, if Luchenko is a 60-point guy, if that becomes the ceiling, I'm not projecting anything. I'm not going off of anything. If he turns into that, probably 2C material, and then Noah Cates can be your 3C for all I care.
Okay.
And then go from there. I mean, I don't know what else you do from there. At that point, you could be passing that back and forth between Sean Couturier and Ryan Poehling for all I care.
I'm back on Elias Pettersson, by the way. Maybe in the offseason. I'm not expecting it right now.
You're always back on Elias Pettersson.
Listen, he's a great player. What's the problem? All right. So those are the two big pieces.
Right. I mean,
Scott Laughton, Rasmus Ristolainen.
Like, here's how simple this can be broken down. There's no more than 4 names that I could even potentially see traded because just circumstances. So it's Laughton.
Let me see if I can guess. We got Laughton and Ristolainen.
Right.
We talked about it before the show, so I know that Cam York is a name that you're going to.
Well, that wasn't what I was going to say there.
It wasn't. Okay.
No, that's just something that's been floated recently that I don't think is happening this week at all. But I think it's. I think that's a big conversation for off-season material, especially if those two sides are not close on a contract.
Okay.
The more that happens, the more you have to start thinking about, then is this guy part of the long term, or am I using him because he's got value at his age? Whatever it may be. I don't even know. I don't know if you ship him off for an actual piece or if you ship him off for more capital. Whatever it may be.
Either way, honestly.
No, so the 4 names I'm going yes, Laughton, Ristolainen are obvious. The possibility that they flip Kuzmenko, which I don't see happening, but that's a name that you have to keep on the radar, and Erik Johnson. That's about it. And I don't think there's a market for Erik Johnson, but I'm just throwing it out there that he's expiring. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's much of a market for him.
But everybody else, I would say at least through the weekend is solidified. Off season, different story, but through the weekend,
unless something crazy happens, right? Obviously, Frost Farabee kind of came a little bit out of nowhere as far as the actual transaction itself.
Right. They were always kind of fluid. We would have still been talking about that.
Sure. But what I'm saying is that anything can happen. And I think Danny Briere has proven that he's listening.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a pretty good chance we show up next week and say, so the Flyers didn't do anything. Or
there's a chance.
Or the Flyers got a draft pick to retain some salary somewhere just to hold salary for the end of the season to facilitate somebody else's trade. Something along those lines. I could see some minor pieces. But I don't see them making any huge adds. I don't see them making any huge subtractions outside of the 2 players previously discussed. I honestly, as far as the Flyers go, I kind of expect it to be a pretty quiet week.
Pretty much. I don't
other than the games, of course.
Let's put it this way: I don't think they're trading Ristolainen this week. I don't see the market heating back up for him in a way that they may hope. Laughton,
but you say that
sure,
suffers an injury and everything changes.
Sure, always possible.
Yep.
Laughton, I think they actually might do it this time.
Really?
Okay. You know what? As much as there's all this stuff floating around, and I know what was on 32 Thoughts, and I know all the stuff that's been going on and things like that.
For the record, the Last Supper photo, hilarious.
But that to me is significant because he wouldn't have done something like that years ago. He knew something? like I know he's saying he didn't expect it to go viral like it did.
Right, but is he trolling?
Well, he is
a bit of a troll.
He is, but I don't think you would. Okay. Then in fairness, you can be trolling all you want to. Would you do something like that if you weren't prepared for what could happen now?
I'm sure he knows it's a possibility.
Right. Like by now, you're not like a stranger to this,
Well, you don't make it clear to the organization that you want to stay if you don't know there are rumors about you,
Yeah, sure. I'm wondering, I just wonder if there's ever going to be a better time. Like sometimes you hit a point where is there a better time to do this than right now? No. Okay. I know that there was something floated out there with Ristolainen about now that the Seth Jones trade happened, what if they retain? I wouldn't be retaining with 2 years left on a contract. Even at 50%.
1 year left, maybe. Ristolainen with 2 left, probably not.
Because at least you could justify $1.5 million, like a buyout almost, if you really had to. To me, I don't even think I would worry about retaining on Laughton because to me, you're getting 1 year plus of a guy who's on a team-friendly contract, and you know everything that he's going to bring. And he fits the bill of a price tag for a guy in that role anyway. There's nothing unfair about it.
If he goes to a Toronto, they might really value that retention.
Maybe. I don't know.
one of those nickel and dime up to the Caps teams.
Well, see, you say that, but at the same time, I sit there and I go, then that's more incentive for them to say, then we're holding him.
But listen, I agree.
And then you revisit it in the offseason when it doesn't matter.
Like you mentioned, I think the Flyers are in a position where they have all the leverage. They do not need to move the player, and they have set their price. And if the price is not met, then the player will not move.
Probably.
Exactly.
Simple
Simple as that.
Okay. And I don't see them budging. I think they get what they want, whether it's a first round pick or a prospect that they like, a guy who can possibly jump in right away. I think that's exactly the direction it has the potential to go. And now we sit back and we wait and see what happens. I haven't seen anything of the sort so far tonight from anybody, meaning not just Flyer wise, but I haven't seen anything from anybody else. I know that Seth Jones gets traded. There's a couple other little things pop around. What was the other one? Nyquist got traded. Yeah. That's the other one. Like, okay, a couple things happen and everybody goes nuts because two teams did something. Okay.
Some early tremors.
It's still early and not a lot has happened yet. So a lot of the guys are still out there and probably will be.
And a lot of the moves might have happened already, right? Like if Rantanen is probably the biggest trade we'll see this season, unless Rantanen gets traded again, that's probably right? Not as even big as the first one. Just for the shock value.
Well, sure. Speaking of that other trade, by the way, I believe, am I reading this right? Spencer Knight starting tonight for Chicago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Making his debut right away. Look, I put this in the group text. I think that was a deal that works for both sides a little bit in terms of, in terms of Florida may hate that deal down the line, but you're not thinking down the line right now. You're trying to win another Stanley Cup right now, and Seth Jones can help you do that possibly, especially not playing in a top role. That was the team I was going to bring up, by the way, with the retention thing, because, okay, Seth Jones's contract. Now it's not the it's not the 9.5 anymore for Florida. It's 7. That's what the retention with the retention. It's 7.
Chicago's retaining for 5 years.
You're right.
Insane.
Now it sounds like, what are you paying a guy like that even $7 million for when he's not even going to play like the top minutes or whatever? Probably, right?
If he's your 4, that's where the cap's going, man.
It's not even about that for me. What I'm saying is the people take that on surface level so much in terms of, well, that guy makes $7 million, so he must be the top guy because it's money. Right. And if he's not, then it's too much, right? When you can go one slot down by cost and say, arguably their best defenseman, Gustav Forsling, is making $5.75 million until 2032.
Yep. And
which is a steal of a deal. So swap the numbers.
Those 2 salaries, done.
You could have said Gustav Forsling's making $9 million and people would have believed you.
Fair enough. All right. So like previously mentioned here, it's probably going to be a little bit of a quiet trade deadline from the Flyers perspective. I do expect some pretty big fireworks throughout the league. I expect there to be quite a lot of activity.
A couple big names out there too.
Well, right, because you have the West, which is an arms race with all the good teams, and then you have the East, where any team can add a superstar and win 2 series. So, like,
I'm gonna say you want to do the right. I was gonna say you want to do the part where just about every we're talking about the Flyers being alive in the race, and they're like 5 teams down the list.
I mentioned they're 4 points out, and there's 4 teams between them in the playoffs.
Right,
it is tight in the
East. By the way, just for context, some of the big names that may be floating out there that we may hear about at deadline time: Brock Nelson's possibly on the move. Who was the other one? Brock Besser's possibly on the move. I've seen that out there a little. Trent Frederick's name came up from Boston. Not that that's a huge name. Yanni Gourde, Braden Shen. Some significant pieces out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mentioned if Scott Laughton is the guy that kind of fills that niche this trade deadline, but if Braden Shen's available, Braden Shen fills that a similar niche pretty darn well.
Braden Shen's not ranking as high as Laughton is on trade boards, though.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's just because he's not as available.
Well, that's what I mean. It's got to be cost. Yeah.
So. Okay, so we're gonna put a pin in the trade deadline stuff there. We will be back next week to talk about that. Little bit of Flyers news before we get out here. Is Matvei Michkov good at hockey? I know we've talked about him a little bit on this show. We've speculated about his future double digit bridge deal.
Well, he was just named the rookie of the month for February, so that's not a bad thing.
For the second time this
year. And oh, by the way, with the little surge that he's been on lately, vaulted himself back into a tie for the rookie lead in points. Like
love to see
from looking like we just had that conversation last week, and after the first game, which yes, the first game back was a big deal, but we sat I remember having that conversation about it's like okay, no doubt about it anymore. This is a 4-person race for the Calder. It's 4 people. It's Michkov, it's Macklin Celebrini, it's Lane Hudson, and it's Dustin Wolf. That's it. Ironically enough, by the way, Dustin Wolf probably the starting goalie on Tuesday night against the Flyers. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah. Do you realize, by the way, that because a lot of Calgary connections here, we've talked about the Farabee Frost trade a couple times already on the show tonight. You realize that since the day that trade was made, they've played 10 games and they've scored a total of 18 goals as a team in the 10 games.
Doofa.
That's not
very good.
Well, I'm saying I'm mentioning that more for a team that's on a 5-game point streak that's won 4 out of 5, no less. That also happened to manage to get 2 points, sitting their starting goalie and giving him kind of an extended break because now it'll be 4 days since he started a game.
Yeah.
You probably should win that game tomorrow.
Probably should. Yeah.
And so you have that. On top of that, this is Calgary's been shut out twice in the last 3 games and scored 1 goal in the other game. So it's a struggle right now.
Yeah, but Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee are going to have so much money on the board. So much money on the board tomorrow.
They'll have money on the board. Will they score?
Morgan Frost will.
I wouldn't be shocked, honestly.
Morgan Frost will. Yeah.
I'm debating. I've been debating back and forth whether to make him the player to watch tomorrow, just because, obvious reasons.
That's the answer.
But at the same time, I could also pull the one guy who has scored a little bit for them lately, which is Nazem Kadri. Pick a guy who's picked up a few points lately.
You got to go with the local connection trade guy. Come on.
Fine.
All right. But regardless, Michkov has looked great since the break. 8 points in the first 3 games back. I did not get any points against Winnipeg on Saturday night, but still.
No, but it doesn't count. But he gets a shootout winner.
He sure does, and boy, it was nasty. And the only goal in the shootout too. So real bona fide shootout winner. That should count as a goal.
Oh, and again, and it was only on Connor Hellebuck, right?
Right. Is that going to get any good?
Right. Got him to bite on that move bad and finished. Good stuff. Yeah, it's been. I don't know if look. The thing about this month in particular, especially starting with this game that they're going to play against Calgary, it's 7 games. It's 7 games at home in 12 days. They also play 2 days after to start a road trip. Yep. So that's going to be 8 games.
It's a grueling month.
It's 8 games in 14 days right out of the gate here, pretty much, and then they still have more to come later. So I don't know. I don't know if he's going to hit that wall again with that type of schedule. I would love to see if he can sustain this through the course of a month like this, knowing that as soon as March is over, they get another 4 days off, I think it is, or 4 days from game action before playing out the final 6.
Hopefully being at home, plenty of rest, you're not traveling.
Right. Maybe, who knows? But I hope that, listen, he's got as much of a shot now. Last week, I don't know if I was giving him as much of a shot at the Calder because I was looking at him behind. Well, and listen, think about it. I wasn't even saying look at how far behind he is in this or that or whatever. I just was picking out Celebrini's missed time, so he's closer to point per game status than Michkov is. Lane Hudson only plays in the most historic Canadian market. But that's the case, and if we're really playing, and if we're really playing the numbers game, Dustin Wolf has a sneaky case for it as a goalie because he's got really good numbers this year.
He's been spectacular. Absolutely, it's a really good rookie crop, and the fact that there's a Flyer right in it is fun, just from a Flyers perspective. But even just from the outside looking in, you're just looking at 4 fantastic rookies, and any one of them could win it.
What's really funny about because to your point, what you're talking about with that it's a good rookie class and all that stuff like that. So I watched at least one of over the weekend, one of the Dallas games that was on. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Fridays because Logan Stankoven had 2 goals that night, I believe. And it was might have been his first 2 goals in a long time because he's only at 9 on the season. And it felt like he was on 7 for a good chunk. And it's he almost became a forgotten part of the Calder race because it was yeah, you faded pretty hard.
Right.
Like he was forgotten. Will Smith is not having the same kind of year that Celebrini is. So he won't be in the running. The next, that's the top 5 in points among skaters, like rookie skaters. Know who 6 is? Cutter Gauthier. And it won't be him either at 25 points in 59 games, but you get my point. Like, that, like it really is. If you're just doing skaters, it's 3 guys. You want to throw the goalie in, it's 4. That's
Absolutely.
it.
Yep.
Like he's going to finish top 4 minimum.
Absolutely. And he will continue his Calder candidacy over the next couple of games here. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, we do have some West Coast teams coming in: Calgary, Winnipeg, Seattle. The last game between now and our next scheduled show is going to be against the New Jersey Devils. As previously mentioned, all at home, 7 of the next 12. The next 2 weeks is all home games for the Flyers.
Yeah, it's a grind.
Yeah, and
for writers too.
Absolutely. It's a grind for these Western Conference teams coming in. Hopefully the Flyers can pick up some points here this week.
You got a chance at a good chunk of it too, because Calgary's struggling. Seattle's not very good.
Not great. No,
New Jersey. Well, I was going to go a different direction with the New Jersey one altogether because, hey, listen, we're within a week of that game. Is Jack Hughes playing? Maybe not. You don't know, right? You don't know what their team's going to look like.
10.
Like Winnipeg is the one game on this that I sit there and I go like, listen, a shootout win might go a different direction the next time you play them.
But hey, listen, if you get a point out of Winnipeg, if you tell me that this team's playing Winnipeg twice in 3 games and they're going to come out of it with 3 of the 4 points,
I'm going to tell you right now,
I don't care how they get.
I'm not even going to make it all wins here on this. They keep the point streak going through New Jersey. You're pretty happy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, look, maybe it's 2 overtime losses or shootout losses in there and you beat Calgary and Seattle, let's just say, but you're going to take it every single time.
Absolutely. And whether that is the case or whether they go 0-4, we will be back next week to talk about it. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. You can find the show everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button over there. Share it with your friends. It really helps us get the word out. Other than that, Kevin, we got a lot of hockey. You ready to go to the Wells Fargo Center a lot over the next 2 weeks?
As much as I can.
All right. So we'll be back next week to talk about it. In the meantime, go Flyers. We'll see you.